Meta will pay Trump $25 million settlement for shutting down his accounts after January 6th. Most of the payment will go towards Trump's presidential library again, much as Disney's payment of $15 million is going to do that. X also, who also kicked Trump off the platform after January 6th, says it's negotiating its own settlement with Trump. Apparently, the Trump people said Mark wasn't going to get into the tent unless he did this. You don't seem to be paying anybody millions of dollars to get in the tent. So what do you think?
So obviously, I think
that was a long sigh that you just had there. You're like,
well, look, I obviously think that the notion of kind of this sort of payoff is, I think, is to put it charitably suboptimal. And I think that the question of, like, the fact is when people are removed from services for violations of terms of service, they're removed for violations of terms of service. And I think that's a perfectly good thing. And I, myself am a massive advocate for, kind of the rule of law and kind of how these kind of contracts work. But I understand expediency in navigation.
Okay, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
Sounds like a mob move to me. Yeah. Wouldn't want a nice company you got there. Wouldn't want anything to happen to it, kind of thing.
Well, let's hope that we see very little of that in the coming years, although obviously we have deep worries in the other direction.
Couldn't he keep doing this, suing people and getting these things?
Well, I guess the question will be is it's kind of like, how much do people kind of respond to this sort of, call it excess pressure on these kinds of things. And I think that frankly, we shouldn't want it as a society. And I think probably there will at some point be a bridge too far on it, and seeing what that bridge looks like, I think is still something where, we're looking for where that bridge too far is.
Yes, that's right. Scott?
Well, there's two dimensions to this. The first is from a pure shareholder standpoint. It probably makes sense when the president's coming after you to say, and you make $20 billion a year in operating profit, to say, yeah, just make it go away. Just give them $25 million for the presidential library and make it go away. The problem is, and I wouldn't expect, based on pattern behavior, Mark Zuckerberg to think anything about this, is that this has real societal implications. And that is, despite the fact Bob Iger made $45 million last year, I would argue he's becoming more and more impoverished in terms of his citizenship. And that is, when a media company says things that are a fraction of the misinformation, slander, disparaging statements that the president has made himself, that happens every day online, and they agree to set precedent by bending a knee and bowing to this intimidation, it sends a chill across the entire fucking nation. I'm on Morning Joe, and I call the president an insurrectionist and a rapist, and Mika stops the show to clarify he was found guilty of sexual abuse. Sexual libel. He was found liable of sexual abuse. Is that the right terminology?
Yes, I just made. Call me Mika Brzezinski, but go ahead.
Look at what we're doing. All right.
Yeah.
And by the way, the judge then went on in his sentencing to say the street term for that is rape. Right. So what do you have? You have a group of people. This is straight out of the fascist handbook. Intimidate anyone who says anything negative about you. And if these companies, in my opinion, had more fidelity to American values and the very important role media plays in checking power, they wouldn't be bending the fucking knee like this. So is it a practical thing to do? Yes, you can't argue with that. Has it sent a chill across the entire country in what is an incredible double standard that the critics of President Trump are now feel that they're being held to? Look at the shit he has said about people that's been incorrect. So Bob and Mark, I expected this from Mark. I was disappointed to see it from Bob. Where are the men? Where are the Americans who are going to stand up and say, no, If you're not guilty, if the entire ecosystem has never been held liable for things much more slanderous or disparaging than these statements, I'll see you in court.
In this case, it wasn't statements. He broke the rules of Facebook, and they kicked him off. That's all. It was not.
Which they're allowed to do.
Yeah, exactly. So Reed, when we talked in October, I asked if you were concerned about Trump and retribution and your own well-being, and you said yes. That was I think before the election. Talk about now. How are you feeling? Because obviously you were one of the more prominent supporters of Kamala Harris. Obviously a big Democratic donor. You do give to Republicans also, for which for some reason you get endless shit. I'm not sure why. I think that's probably fine to do that. How do you feel now? Do you feel in that crosshairs that we had discussed?
Well, it's unclear. I'm hopeful that a bunch of my friends who are around the administration say, look, that's just kind of all rhetoric and, isn't actually going to be
That's what they say
part
to
of
you.
what's,
Yeah.
yes, that's what they say to me. And so that obviously is hopeful. But obviously it's one of the things that I think, both me personally and we as Americans need to watch carefully, because we do want to continue to be, the home of the brave and land of the free. And I think that that's very important to be, resolutely against, kind of abuses of state power for individual interests. And so, like I said, I went and talked to a whole bunch of people who are, kind of in, and around the current administration, said, look, I have this worry. They said, look, we've talked to a bunch of people. They say this is not something we're going to do. I was like, okay, then, let's let, you know, let, let, let's wait
Are
and
these
see.
the same people that said he wasn't going to let out everybody at January 6th? He wasn't going to let out the criminals, but then he did. That's
It
the same
wasn't the
people.
same. It wasn't the same people as those.
Yeah, he's done that several times. He's done that
Yes,
several times.
no,
So
there's worries, and like for example, letting out the people who assaulted police officers is as per what Scott was saying earlier, is a terrible signal. It's basically saying, hey, like if you're doing violence in a cause that I am supportive of, I have this thing of a presidential pardon, and that's obviously, frankly, terrifying, concerning.
right, but you didn't want a presidential pardon, correct?
No, of course not.
Yeah,
but
you didn't
but
do
here's
anything.
but here's the problem. If I'm a thoughtful guy who's high profile with a lot of business interests, with a family, I would be inclined. I'm not going to speak for you, Reed. I'd be inclined to keep a very low profile over the next 12 months, whereas the people on the right are emboldened to be aggressive and pollute and flood the zone with misinformation and bullshit and attacks, and the people on the other side of the aisle feel like, well, maybe I should just keep quiet for a while, because they are removing security details of people, which is nothing but repackaged violence. When you took out the head of the Iranian security forces and you ordered that strike as a general, and the president, for whatever reason, doesn't like you, is removing your security detail, that is repackaged violence against that person. So what we have is a group. This is the road to fascism. Keep them quiet. Put a chill across people. I'm going to keep a low profile. I'm just not going to be quite as aggressive. That is. Let me be clear. One of the roads to fascism, and I want you both to respond to this, is littered with calls or accusations that people are overreacting. Call me overreacting.
Let me just say, Amanda loves this whole jam, Scott. She was like, Scott's on fire. I love it. She was vaguely attracted to you, I think.
Vaguely is doing a lot of work there.
Vaguely is
doing a lot of work
She
there.
was. She wanted me to tell you. I think you're right, but I think it's people that are very high profile, like Reed, certainly aren't backing down. Don't seem to be disappearing. He's right here, right? And he's talking about it. So I think the question is, when Mark does these deals when he just doesn't have to, and it doesn't help him from a shareholder point of view. I really think that's nonsense. It's really, but again, we expected Mark to do this. Sorry, I know Reed was early at Facebook and had been a mentor to Mark. I don't think he's listening to someone like you anymore. But that said, you and Bill Gates had been, and probably are no longer, I would guess. But I don't know.
Look, the thing I think that the American people should pay a lot of attention to the removing the security detail
Mhm.
from, a person who spent their entire life serving the American people, putting himself in harm's way, kind of helping secure the safety of America, both locally and Americans abroad, and saying, hey, for petty reasons, I am putting that person directly in the harm's way of violence. And I think that is an unpatriotic, personal thing that I think is extremely important that everyone should pay attention to. And I think it's exactly that, is I think that, as Scott's saying, on the things that are like, that is the kind of thing that is deeply un-American,
Mhm.
like, I think people need to speak up about.
100%.